Behind us is the bungalow. Now, if you look ahead, you will see a story building. We call that story building Achampon Jirambisa. I'm just giving you the location, where it is located. This baobab tree has a great history, and it dates back to the time the headquarters of Dagbang was transferred from the western Dagbang to the east. Now, at the time, Na Dataa Tua relocated to this area. Yendi was traversed by so many trade routes. So we had caravans coming from Kano, from Timbuktu, from the Maghreb, sometimes stopping here, sometimes proceeding to Kitekarachi, which was a source of salt and kola nuts. So Yendi was a commercial center, a very vibrant commercial center. So because of its importance, it attracted several people until it became a cosmopolitan area. Now, and you know, when the community develops, the social vices also appear. So it came to a time, some young wives of the king who could not access the matrimonial bed of the king and wanted to have children for the king, decided to take up boyfriends or men friends outside the palace. So it was brought to the attention of the kings, and the punishment was set up. Anybody who was found sleeping with a king's wife was brought to this place and beheaded. So we call this place Na Dataa Tua, where Na is king or chief, Dataa is rival, and Tua is baobab tree. So that's the compound word, Na Dataa Tua, the king's rival's baobab tree. So this is where the execution took place. Now, it came to a time around 1886. One Malam was wrongly accused of sleeping with the king's wife. And the issue was this. You know, before a prince of Dagbang becomes a Yana, especially those days, he had to become very old because he had to move from one chieftaincy to another chieftaincy, moving higher up the ladder until he came to occupy either Savlego, Karga, or Myang. And if he was lucky, then he was promoted to Yendi if there was any vacancy. So by the time they came, they were old. You understand? And by the Dagbang tradition, when somebody becomes the king of Dagbang, there are certain chiefs who are obliged to give him wives. And the wives they gave them, they normally give them were all young women, virgins. You get it? And at the time, the king also comes in here. He is old. So you know he cannot perform very well on bed. And he already came with many women because as a prince, once a prince is growing and people know that one day he will become king, you know what they do? They give him wives. So as he's moving from one chieftaincy to another, he gets many wives. Then when it comes to Yendi itself, there's so many people, especially chiefs, they are obliged to do that. Once a Yana is skinned, those chiefs they are forced to give him wives. It's compulsory. It's part of their duty, their traditional duty to do that. The Bushevina gives him a wife. The Kugana gives him a wife. The Tonlana gives him a wife. The Gupena gives him a wife. Namuna gives him a wife. So many. You get it? And then by tradition, the rule was that if a woman cooks for the family, then he will have access to the king's bed. But the king, because of the authority that he had somebody who was specially cooking his small food, who was called Mwambelana. You understand? So if Mwambelana is already cooking the king's food, and then you are now cooking for the whole house, how do you get to the king's bed? So it became a problem. You understand? So what the people now did was that if you gave your daughter to a chief, Then you will be at home and you will be watching over her in the palace. To make her get access to the king, what you do is you also go and get some malams to write some concoctions for her to drink and rub her face so that it will attract the king. You understand? Then the king can invite her to the bed. So through that, you could become pregnant. You get it? Now it came that was during Nandanis and Dangerlon's reign, 13 years before his death in 1999. So you can just subtract and know the year it took place. There was this young girl who, contracted a malam to help her to get the attraction of the king. The malam did that, and it really worked. And she became attracted to the king. And the king loved the girl so much that loved the queen so much that he even took away the Mombla cooking and gave it to her. So within a very short time, she became pregnant. And in the palace, once queen was pregnant, then all the other queens were fighting the pregnancy because they don't know the baby that's going to be born. They are all many. They want their children to also become kings. So once a woman was pregnant, the rivals were fighting the pregnancy. So a woman that was pregnant also have to tell the parents to be watching over the pregnancy, helping her with concoctions and just for the pregnancy to survive. So there was one errand boy in the palace that this woman used to to bring the concoction. And the woman used to smuggle the king's mombla, you understand, and give it to the errand boy. So whilst the palace were taking from the big pot, this errand boy was taking food from the mombla, from the king's own pot. And you know the king's pot is different. So the others also became envious and went and told the king that that young queen was flirting with that young boy who was going, the errand boy. So the king invited the young girl. He loved her so much. He loved the woman so much and queried her. So the queen told the boy that you see what has happened now. If I continue feeding you from the king's pot, you will not be there, I will not be there. Because they were already suspecting that. So I beg you, still go and do the work for me. But I will know how I will reward you one day, but I've forgiven you, feeding you from the king's small pot, Michael. And the boy became offended and told the girl that if you won't give me food from the king's pot, I will not also go for the concoction. And no queen is allowed to leave the palace at night. And even when a queen is leaving the palace, she should explain where she is going. It became compulsory for the queen to now go for her own concoction, which meant that she would have to smuggle, in the night when everybody's sleeping, then she'll go and then untie some zana mats in the urinary and then sneak out and go and take the concoction. Then this boy reported again to the king that the woman had a friend in town and she leaves every night to go to visit. So the pregnancy the woman is even carrying is not for the king. And the other queens were happy. They were happy about that. You get it? So the king said, okay, fine. I'm not going to disbelieve what you said, but I'm going to put some spice on her. So the following night, when everybody was asleep, left the palace and then people were following her. She didn't know she was being tracked. She went to the malam's house. The malam came out and gave her, and those days they were putting the welga in what do you call it, calabash guts, gale, you know it. So she just came out and handed it over. Then the errand boys just came around and asked the queen what she was doing there. At that time of the night, she was not in the palace when she was with a malam or somebody, so they just arrested them and brought them to the palace and tied them. Then the following morning, they invited the elders of town, of the palace, and they came to try them. And they were found guilty. So they brought them here. At that time, this was far from town. Nobody visited here. It was very far from town. And even from Kuga village. It was very far. And whilst judgment was taking place at the palace, the community people will come around. So when somebody, is declared what we call it guilty, then they'll begin shouting, shaming them, and whipping them, and throwing sand at them. So we look at the shame, and they led them to this place. And there was, the executioner was called Chellana. Chellana. He was placed at based at there's a village some 4 miles from here. He was the executioner, so he was summoned. He brought them here and executed the woman, the pregnant woman. And the Malam told them that he was begging that they should give him some time to perform ablution and pray the previous night's Isha prayer, which he didn't perform, and then the morning prayer too. The way he was in chains, he couldn't pray, and he didn't want to die without those prayers. So he was allowed. He prayed the Isha prayer, the previous night's Isha prayer, and then the morning prayer. And he told God that you are my witness. You know I'm not guilty. Don't let this be a bad fellow and follow my generation. Generations after me that will come. Prove to the people that I'm innocent. I only supported the girl to get the king's attraction. And I cannot argue out, but you and your angels bear me witness. And then he told them, the executioner, to do his work. So they came and tied his hands behind him. And then placed his head on the stone. The stone is here. Where you see it? It's here, just here. Yes. That dome-shaped stone. But then it was not like this. It was the British that carved it out to make sure it wasn't lost when they heard this history. So this is the Baba tree. So they tied him down and executed him. And instead of blood, it was milk. That came out from the cat throat. And this proved to them that no, the man was not guilty. So they rushed to inform the king that this is what they have seen. When they slaughtered the man, instead of blood, they saw milk rather coming out. Then the king said, no, you have killed God's slave. And from today, I have banned it. I have banned the execution from today. And I want you people to go back and give a befitting burial. Don't leave the corpse there for animals to eat it up. By the time they left the palace and came here, the body could not be found. Wow. But there was foam around. Foam, foam. When you wash something, okay, there was foam around, and there's sweet fragrance all over. That was another, something they saw. So they rushed back. And when they were coming, the king told the imam, the chief imam, to bring the imams to come and pray, the Muslims to come and pray over his body. So the executioners came first and didn't find the body. And they followed by the imams. They came, they couldn't find the body. And they said, now, that look, that man was God's servant. It means the angels have come to bath the body and they have taken the body away. So they started, fetching the foam and then smearing on their body. Some was fetched and then sent to the king too, to smear his face. So that was how the thing ended. But at night, the executioner didn't sleep. The pregnant woman who was beheaded came around and told the man that he was looking for, in those days, to confirm that the execution had taken place. Anytime somebody was executed, the arm was cut. They would cut their arm and go and show it to the king, and then send it to their home where they had some concoctions. So that night, the ghost of the woman came to meet them and told the woman to give her arm. In the Bani, she said, "Tamambo, Charlana, Tamambo, Kankulkan beat Mwai, Bibe Yonkura." So the man thought it was a joke. It came and came and came. He left the house, saw his old man. The old man came, they burnt some incense and all that to drive the ghost away, but they couldn't. You get it? So finally, Charlana became mad. So he was roaming around in town. Then suddenly he also caught wolves. There was a disease at that time called yours. Jar. He developed jar and then went to the bush and died. And that was how the executions ended. So when the heads were cut, they were put in a certain hole here behind the tree. If you go, you see it. That's where they were throwing the heads. Now, when the British came,